That feeling, that pure love and joy of reading made me so happy. Hi friends, my name is Katya. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be the mid-year book freakout tag. Even though we're not quite at the mid-year yet, we're still in June, so I hope you'll forgive me for being just a little bit early. But I was really excited to talk about the highlights of the books that I've read so far this year. So we're going to be talking favorite books, least favorite books, disappointments, things that I'm looking forward to in the second half of the year. And of course, I'm going to be doing that by answering the questions in the mid-year book freakout tag. This is one of my favorite booktube traditions. I always get so excited to watch other people's mid-year book freakout tag videos or just to see people's answers to these questions. So I will be pasting the questions of this tag down in the description, and if you feel so inclined, I would love to see your answers, whether you answer them in a video or if you put them down in the comments below. I'll also have the tag creators linked below, as well as I added some of the questions that Katie Whittruck added last year. So again, all of that is down in the description. Check it out. But without further ado, let's get right on into the first question. Question number one is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2025? I don't know if this one is necessarily a favorite of all time, but the book that made me the most excited to be a reader this year was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This book just had such high expectations thrust upon it because it is the prequel of a really beloved series and it is following a really beloved character. This is Haymitch's prequel. We follow Haymitch in his games, which were unique because they featured double the amount of tributes than typical Hunger Games years. I really liked that this book felt similar tonally to the very first Hunger Games book because it was such a page turner. I was really invested in it and completely glued to it and didn't feel like I wanted to put it down. And I just felt so grateful that Suzanne Collins is still writing books and still writing Hunger Games books. Not necessarily up to the exact caliber of the original trilogy, but are still very strong and very enjoyable to read. I also really enjoyed The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This book follows two best friends who are at a very abusive reformatory school in the 1960s. It's a really tragic, sad story, and it becomes even more tragic and sad when you realize that the school that they go to is based on a real school that only closed in like 2011. It's just a really powerful story, and I definitely recommend, especially if you're a fan of historical fiction. I also really loved The X-Files. This follows Georgia and Eli, a former couple who broke up for reasons kind of unknown to us at the very beginning of the book, who end up reuniting because their mutual best friend is getting married, and they are both in the wedding party, assisting with the wedding, and in doing so have to interact with one another again. There's a lot of tension between them because they both obviously still have feelings for each other. I just really liked these characters and their romance and the deep friendship at the heart of their romance. I felt like their relationship was really believable and the conflict was really believable, and I felt like it was handled really well. And then the last book that I'll talk about in this favorite section is Heartless Hunter. I really didn't expect that much from this book, but I was in it. I was glued. I felt completely enraptured by the world. We follow a witch and a witch hunter. I expected it to be just kind of like boring, basic romantasy, and like it kind of was, but I had so much fun with it. I was sitting next to my sister while I was reading this book because I read it on a plane while we were going on vacation, and I felt like every few pages I would tap her and tell her what was happening in my book because I could not contain myself. I needed to talk about it. I needed to like gush and giggle and spill the plot to another person, and so that at least was one of my favorite reading experiences of the year. Best sequel you've read so far in 2025. I've read a lot of romance companion sequels this year because I'm in my reading romance series out of order era, so some of these sequels I haven't really even read the books that come before them, like Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is the second book in the Chestnut Springs series. I now have read books 2, 3, and 4 and have yet to read 1 and 5, but Heartless follows Willa and Cade. Willa ends up being the nanny for single dad Cade's son, and I really enjoyed their banter, their dynamic. I thought they were really fun, and Willa in particular was a really entertaining narrator to read from the perspective of. I also read Play Along, which is book 4 in the Windy City series. So far I have read books 2 and 4 in that series, but this book follows Isaiah and Kennedy. Isaiah is a baseball player and Kennedy works as an athletic trainer on his team. The two of them end up getting married after a drunken night in Vegas, and Kennedy is at risk of losing her job because the owner says that it's inappropriate for people who work for the team and people on the team to have casual relationships, and Isaiah says, no, this isn't casual. Actually, we have been dating and been serious, and we decided to elope, and we didn't mean for it to get out. Now it has, but I'm telling you, not a casual relationship, a very serious relationship. So they end up in kind of a fake dating marriage where they have to convince everybody that their marriage is not the product of an accident and was actually really purposeful, and that they have been dating for a long time and haven't just been like acquaintances slash friends. Even though the romance in this could sometimes veer into cheesy, corny territory, I really liked both of these characters, and the ending got so emotional I did cry. And I didn't expect to cry while reading a sports romance, but Kennedy and Isaiah were just so tender and I love them. Last romance specific sequel I'll talk about is Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. This is the companion sequel to Out on a Limb, and this book follows the best friends of the characters in that first book. Sarah and Caleb were high school sweethearts and now have been together for over a decade, and this book in particular is about them addressing long-standing issues in their relationship, and particularly Sarah's need for independence and Caleb's need to provide everything for her and the tension between those things. I liked how unique this book felt as far as a marriage in trouble romance, and how they really had to address things within themselves in order to come together and like really listen to the other person. Really sweet, really heartwarming, really steamy, and just overall a really good time. Probably not as good as that first book, but I still really enjoyed it. I also have been reading the Throne of Glass series this year with my friend Chloe, which I've been enjoying more than I expected. This series, if you don't know, begins with a book where an assassin enters a competition to become the king's personal assassin, and she uncovers a lot of secrets about the castle and about the kingdom as she is participating. But my favorites in the series have been Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows so far. I feel like every book in the series is getting better and better, at least for me, and I'm definitely excited to continue on and hopefully finish the series by the end of the year. New release you haven't read yet but want to. My number one on my list is definitely Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a love story following astronauts in the 1980s, and that's really all I know. That's all I need to know. I have seen relatively positive reviews from people that I trust, and I've enjoyed Taylor Jenkins Reid in the past. I feel like her last book, was that Carrie Soto? That feels literally so long ago, so I'm excited to get back into Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing. Also very pumped for Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This book follows 3 characters in 3 drastically different time periods and the things that connect them. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure that they are vampires. Maybe some of them are vampires and some of them are lesbian vampires. And again, that seems like I don't know very much about it, and really I don't. I like that vagueness going into this book. It's one that I think would be really, really good for Summerween, and so I'm very excited to save it for that. I'm also planning to read this book, which I just received on hold from the library. That's Rebel Witch. This is the sequel to Heartless Hunter. Based on how much I enjoyed the first book in the series, I hope that I enjoyed this one just as much, but I have seen more mixed reviews on this, so we will see. And then finally, Enchantra by Kaylee Smith. This is the sequel to Phantasma, which I read last year and absolutely adored. This second book follows Genevieve, who is Ophelia, the main character from the first book's sister. She, for reasons that are unclear, ends up invited to a cursed palace in Italy, but when she gets there, she ends up trapped in a dangerous labyrinth game. She's there with these 7 siblings, one of whom is named Rowan, who, again, for reasons that are kind of unclear from the back of the book, she has to be in a like fake dating relationship with. If I was just reading this description without having read and loved that first book so much, I think I would be a lot more skeptical of this. But Phantasma was such a silly, fun, kind of paranormal romantasy time, and so I feel like I expect the same thing from this one, and I'm excited to be back in this world. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. My number one is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This comes out in August, and it is a Snow White retelling. T. Kingfisher's Thorn Hedge was one of my favorite books of last year, and that was a Sleeping Beauty retelling, so I have high expectations for this, especially because I love Snow White. It was a Disney character that I felt very connected to as a child because I was really pale and had short dark hair. But in this book, instead of following Snow White, we follow a healer named Anya who is called to the palace to help an ailing Princess Snow. And while she's there, she ends up exploring a magical world inside a mirror. So again, very high expectations. So excited for this. Another book that I'm very intrigued by is The Possession of Alba Diaz. I don't know if I would be interested in this except for the fact that it is by Isabel Cañas, who wrote another one of my favorite books of last year. Vampires of El Norte was like a horror romance that was a little bit heavier on the romance than the horror, although there were definitely some frightening elements as far as the vampire vampires went. This book follows a family who leaves their hometown because there is a plague sweeping it and they want to avoid it. So they go to an old like silver mining town, and while they're there, Alba becomes possessed by an evil spirit inside the mine. This book comes out on the same day as Hemlock and Silver, so that will be a very exciting book release day for me. But we'll see how far I'm able to get in this book if I get too scared, because like those demony possession things are the things that really freak me out. But I know that I will at least give it the chance of a couple chapters because I loved Isabel Cañas's writing in The Vampires of El Norte so much. It was so lush and lyrical and atmospheric and immersive. Definitely very excited to pick this up. Hi, sorry, I had to take a break to get some coffee, and I also had a Zoom meeting with my advisor for my fall class schedule, so that's done. And back to the tag. Back to the tag with kind of a bummer of a question, which is, what is your biggest disappointment of the year so far? Unfortunately, it is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This book follows Xavier and Samantha, who meet in Minnesota at the beginning of the book. Xavier is a veterinarian who Samantha meets because her cat has a very unique medical ailment. The two of them decide to go on a first date together. It is the most perfect first date that anybody's ever been on. It's very obvious that Xavier and Samantha are soulmates, but Samantha is moving to California so that she can live with her mother, who has early onset dementia. She and her family are all together really trying to take care of her and keep her from having to leave their home. And so Xavier and Samantha have to navigate a long distance relationship. I talked a lot about this book in my last wrap up, so I'll have that linked if you want more in-depth thoughts. But overall, I thought that this book was so boring. It felt like nothing happened for most of the book. Even when things were happening, it seemed like nothing was happening. I was really annoyed at these characters and how mopey they were. Not in terms of her family, I really liked her family dynamics, but they were so mopey about the long distance relationship and so like hopeless, it felt like sometimes, and that just really got under my skin. It just did not live up at all to the other Abby Jimenez books that I've loved so much in the past, like Yours Truly, like Part of Your World, like Just for the Summer. And so after having so many 4 and 5-star Abby Jimenez books, I was shocked and upset to have to give this book 2 stars. I also was quite disappointed by Great Big Beautiful Life. As much as I did like it and did enjoy it, this was the newest Emily Henry release. I did not feel like it lived up to previous Emily Henry books that I've loved so much, and it also felt like a big change into a more contemporary fiction, historical fiction, women's fiction kind of genre rather than her typical women's fiction romance genre. This book follows Hayden and Alice, who are both competing to be able to write the memoir of this really famous socialite celebrity. She, after all of the drama in her life, is very private and very careful about who she wants representing her life story in a memoir. So she has Alice and Hayden both interview her so that she can decide who she feels most comfortable with and who she would rather tell her story. And my biggest issue with this book is just how much it felt like The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it's not that The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is a bad book, and it's not that Great Big Beautiful Life is a bad book. It just felt like I had read it before. The structure, the tone, the reveals, everything reminded me so much of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo that it was kind of frustrating to read at times. And so even though it had Emily Henry's, you know, her unique writing and her very clever dialogue and characters that I mostly liked and enjoyed, I just was definitely let down by this, especially because in the past her books have been glowing 5 stars for me, and this one was just like fine and derivative. My biggest surprise of the year, I'll talk about this book again, is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. I was very hesitant to pick this up because I read one of Jessica Joyce's previous books, You with a View. As far as I know, I think she only has the 2 out, and The X-Files I adored, and You with a View I kind of hated. You with a View is a road trip romance that follows our main character Noelle, who reconnects with her high school rival when she finds out that her grandmother used to have a relationship with his grandfather. And the thing that really bothered me about this book and about this romance is that the conflict between the couple was based basically entirely on dishonesty and on miscommunication, and that really got on my nerves because I was not convinced of their romance by the end of the book. I was not rooting for them to be together. It seemed like I, as a reader, was told over and over that they were rivals without really seeing examples of that in their interactions. And I also felt like the tension between them was broken too quickly. So I I went into the X-Files with kind of low expectations. I didn't trust this author to write a romance dynamic that I would enjoy, or to write a conflict that I would think was believable, or that I would like the way that they handled their relationship, especially when it is a second chance romance, because I think that second chance romances in general are one of the more difficult romance tropes to get right, because you have these characters that have so much history between them, and you have to write a breakup reason that is both believable as a reason for them to break up, and also not so bad that it's still like forgivable and it makes sense that they would be able to get back together. But in this book, everything from the romance, from the characters, from the deep levels of emotion and intimacy between them that you could feel even from the very first moment that they interacted and you didn't really know very much about their past, to the conflict and the breakup and the way that they were able to address it, everything was executed perfectly. I was so impressed by this book. I think that in particular, if you've enjoyed Happy Place by Emily Henry, this is one that you should definitely look into reading. I just absolutely loved it. It was a very pleasant surprise. Favorite new author debut or new to you? I'm going to mention Colson Whitehead, author of Nickel Boys again. Like I said, I enjoyed Nickel Boys so much, and I particularly liked that the writing was able to be emotional without being sentimental. You felt a little bit distant from the characters at times, not because they weren't well written, but because I could feel them as characters had walls up and didn't want to let people in, and I feel like that really contributed to shaping their personalities and their attitudes about the world in the story. I also be really interested to read more from Naina Kumar, who is the author of Flirting with Disaster. This is another second chance romance, but we follow our main character, Mina, and she is hoping to get engaged to her boyfriend. They are both aspiring politicians in DC, but in order to do so, she has to get a divorce from her still husband, who she got married to in Vegas several years before. She goes to Texas to try to convince Nikhil to sign the divorce papers, but when she gets there, there is a hurricane sweeping through the town, and the two of them have to stay in this house that they used to live in together and address their relationship and navigate the things that tore them apart, and maybe find their way back to falling in love with each other. I really liked all the characters in this book. They were so vibrant, even the side characters, and even the side characters who I didn't feel like I was supposed to like so much, like Mina's disposable politician fiance in Washington DC. He seemed like a character that I shouldn't really care about, but I was really rooting for him and really hoping that he was able to find a romance by the end of the book. Also, like Mina's sister, who had a very small role in the book, but a very impactful role. I would be so interested in reading more from this author, and particularly about some of those side characters. Next question is about a newest fictional crush, and I'm also going to include a newest fictional character. I really loved Isaiah in Play Along by Liz Tomford. He was just so kind and so patient and so obsessed with Kennedy in a way that was like maybe too much at times, but I really loved it. He was really communicative about his feelings, really dedicated to making Kennedy fall in love with him and making me as a reader fall in love with him, and I just really loved what he brought to the dynamic of the romance in this book. And then my newest favorite character is from a book that I just finished, in Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. I am in love with Maya. She was such a fabulous character to read from the perspective of, because she's so funny and she's so confident and she's able to read the people around her really well, and she was a super entertaining perspective to be in. I found myself as I was reading this book being like, I want to be more like Maya. I want to have loud confidence that she has, the deep knowledge that even though this guy rejects her in the book like 4 different times, because it is an age gap romance, and I believe Connor and Maya have a 15-year age gap, and he is very concerned about the power dynamics at play because of that, which is so nice and so respectful, but could get very frustrating as the book went on because it was so obvious that there is no power imbalance. It's fine, they are in love and should allow themselves to be in love, but I think that respectfulness did make him a very likable character, and I liked Maya as a narrator even more. I forgot to mention that book in my favorite sequels section because it is the sequel to Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, which I have not yet read, and I also didn't mention it in my favorite books of the year section because I wrote out my answers to these questions before I finished that book yesterday, but honestly it might be one of my favorite romances, favorite books that I've read all year. I'll have to let it marinate a little bit more because it's only been a day since I finished it, but I I had so much fun with it. A book that made you happy, again, Problematic Summer Romance. I was giggling like the whole time I was reading this book. Also Heartless Hunter, like I mentioned before. It is rare for me to not want to put a book down, to be so invested as I was in Heartless Hunter, and that feeling, that pure love and joy of reading made me so happy. A book that made you cry, again, Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. There is a scene about a character in solitary confinement that is absolutely devastating. I highly recommend this book, but it's one that I would be careful with and make sure that you're in a good emotional state before you go in, because it's a sad one. A more happy cry came when I read Play Along. The end of Play Along is so heartwarming. I think that this book in particular has a lot of very cheesy, corny moments, but I was so in it. I was like, Kennedy and Isaiah love each other and I love them and they're going to be together, and that gave me a happy cry. A book you enjoyed with mixed reviews. The first one I'm going to talk about, I also kind of have mixed feelings about. This is Our Infinite Fates. We follow our main characters Evelyn and Arden, and they are cursed. They are reincarnated over and over and over and have been reincarnated for centuries, but every time in every life that they have to kill each other before their 18th birthdays. Why? That is very unclear at the beginning of the book, and Evelyn doesn't really know why, but Arden does, and he's keeping it from her. And the book follows them in the present day, in their current life, when Evelyn is just really desperate to finally break this curse and not die before her 18th birthday, and then a bunch of flashbacks of them in these different lives as different people and falling in love in every single one. I'm realizing now that this is a very romance heavy mid-year book freakout tag, and for that I'm not sorry. I have been reading a lot of romance this year. I feel like I mostly believed the sort of soulmatey connection between Arden and Evelyn, although the book definitely did drag around the 2/3 mark when I was like, oh my god, when are we going to get the reveal? When are we going to know why this is happening? Because we went through so many flashbacks, so many lives, so much drama. How can the reveal possibly be good enough to justify all of this ridiculousness? And I will say I was pretty floored by the twist. I thought it was really, really interesting, but the ending and the way that they solved things was just a little convenient. I don't know. Overall, I mostly enjoyed this, and I especially liked that throughout all of the flashbacks there was so much diversity, both in terms of time periods and locations, and whether Evelyn and Arden were both women or both men or a man or a woman. Their discussions of like identity and gender I thought were really compelling, and I thought it was a memorable and a unique book, but maybe not a perfect book. Another book that I enjoyed with mixed reviews was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This book follows a swimmer and a diver who start up a sexual relationship because they find out that their preferences are kind of perfectly compatible. I think a lot of the mixed reviews that I've seen are particularly because of the way that kink is explored in this book. Whether people say that it was too much or too little, or their relationship was based entirely on sex, but I feel like Ali Hazelwood addresses that inside this book, because there's a character towards the end who implies their relationship is just sex and that they don't have anything deeper than that. But by that point in the book, you can see how well Lucas and Scarlett really understand each other and really have formed a deep emotional connection based on very deep trust. And so when you get to this point in the book where the character is implying that their relationship is shallow because it's just based on sex, it's so clear that that's not true at all. And I, for one, really liked that their sexual relationship and their emotional relationship really affected each other, and you could see the ways that they influenced one another, because I think it's more realistic. I know different people will have different opinions when it comes to smut in books, but I generally prefer when it feels integral to the story and integral to the development of the character's romantic connection. But I know that there are a lot of people who prefer when spicier scenes in books are ones that are easy to like skim or skip through and that they don't have anything to do with the plot. And I definitely also like closed door, low spice romance as well, but if it's there, I want it to be important. That's just my 2 cents and how I feel, but I would be so interested to know your opinion on that if you want to share. But yes, Deep End, a book that I really enjoyed, even though it had mixed reviews. What books do you want to reread this year? Number one, the book that I need to reread this year, because the movie adaptation I believe is coming out at some point this year, although I'm not exactly sure when, is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is my favorite Emily Henry, probably just one of my favorite books, period. Definitely one of my favorite romances. This is a friends to lovers romance following Poppy and Alex. They became best friends in college and started a tradition where they went on vacation together every year. But now in the present day, they aren't speaking and we don't really know why, and we see them trying to reconnect, interspersed with all of these flashbacks of past vacations and how their friendship has evolved and maybe turned into something more over the years. There is a Netflix adaptation of this in the works, and I would really love to get a reread in before I only picture these characters as those actors. And also just because, like I said, this is one of my favorite books and one that will absolutely make me happy cry and sad cry, and I'm looking forward to it. I also would really love to reread Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I've been talking about a lot of Ali Hazelwood in this video, but Bride is my personal favorite of hers. This is a vampire werewolf romance. I read this for Summerween last year, and the sequel to Bride, Mate, is coming out this fall, so I would love to reread this in preparation for Mate. I'm also kind of intrigued to reread An Ember in the Ashes. This is a YA fantasy series loosely inspired by ancient Rome. I remember feeling so on the edge of my seat while I was reading this, but I read it basically a decade ago. I read the first 3 books in the series and never got around to the 4th one, so I would love to reread this and actually finish the series. But I was reminded of this because my little sister, who's in high school, is reading this book right now, and I think it would be fun to read this and be able to discuss it with her. Series you want to finish by the end of the year? I definitely want to, and I think I likely will finish Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I just finished Queen of Shadows. I'm reading Assassin's Blade right now. I think I probably should have read Assassin's Blade before Queen of Shadows, but the library holds list had different ideas. And then Chloe and I are still kind of on the fence on if we want to do the tandem read for the books at the end of this series. If you don't know what the tandem read is, there are 2 books that take place at the same time, so a lot of people recommend reading a few chapters of one book and then a few chapters of the other and going back and forth instead of reading one and then the other. You're reading them in tandem instead of consecutively. So if you have a strong opinion about whether the tandem read is a good idea, I would love to know, because it just seems like kind of complicated to keep track of within our book club. So if it's really worth it, maybe we will, but right now we're leaning towards not. But yes, no matter how we read it, I'm very sure that we will finish the series by the end of the year. Also, of course, the books that I mentioned before, Rebel Witch and Enchantra. This I'm pretty sure is definitely a duology, so that'll be done. I don't know if there will be more books in this series, but at least it will be finished for now. And then also Ruthless Vows. This is the sequel to Divine Rivals, a 5-star historical romantasy that I read back in 2023. And I don't really know why I never got around to Ruthless Vows. I think probably because I saw a couple people say it was a letdown compared to the first book, so I got nervous, but I would love to actually give it a try for myself and finish the series. Now for some questions about my yearly reading goal, and I'm like kind of nervous to talk about this, but my reading goal for the year I set at 25 because I wanted to keep it low so that I would feel more motivated to read longer books or books that maybe I couldn't read as quickly. And specifically, I made it my goal to read 3 specific books. I said if I read no other books this year, I will feel accomplished if I read these books that have been on my shelf for a long time. So first is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. As you can see, I got not very far in this book and took a pause. So back in, I want to say March, I got this far in this book and then I set it down because I was just more invested in other things that I was reading, more interested in other things that I was reading. Also, I was in school, so that was taking up a lot of my mental energy as well. But I do think I would like to pick this up soon and at least really try to finish it by the end of the year. I think because this is such a beloved book, I want to like it so badly. And honestly, maybe it might just not work for me, but I want to give it more of a chance before I officially give up. Also, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is a book that has been on my bookshelf for years. I've never opened it up. I really love the James Dean movie, so I have a feeling that I would like this story, because if I like this book as much as I like the movie, it's absolutely going to be a new 5-star favorite. But something about such a thick, deckled-edged classic is very intimidating to me, but that is why it is a goal for me to read it, because I have to push myself, because I know that it will be rewarding and I know that I will like it, but I'm also scared. My last book on my list of goal books for the year. This is a true story about an attorney who assists prisoners on death row. I really loved the movie adaptation that came out for this a couple years ago, and so again, I know that I will like this book even though it's a very heavy, difficult topic to read. But yes, these are my goal books. So I have reached my number goal of 25 already, but it is my goal to read these by the end of the year. The next question is very connected. It is, are there any books that you've been putting off or books that you need to read by the end of the year? And again, it's these ones. I like really need to buckle down and dedicate myself to these books. But as far as other books, I'd also really love to read Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. This is a fantasy that is described as the Poppy War's darkness meets the last Airbender's elemental magic, and we follow our main character Misaki, who left her past as a fighter in a faraway country, but now with war and invasion looming on the horizon, she kind of has to become a fighter again in order to protect her family and her son. I've heard really great things about this book, and the author is from Wisconsin, which I'm also from, and so I always want to support. This is Mile High by Liz Tomford. This is actually the first book in the Windy City series. I've read the second book, The Right Move, and the fourth book, Play Along, so now I'm interested in reading this first book, Mile High, as well as book 3, Caught Up, and book 5, which just came out, Rewind It Back. And then 5-star predictions for the rest of the year. I have a very good feeling about Annie Bot. This book follows Annie Bot, who was created to be the perfect girlfriend for her human owner, Doug. Doug says that he loves that Annie's artificial intelligence makes her seem more like a real woman, but the more human Annie becomes, the less perfectly she behaves. The description says that it's an explosive meditation on intimacy, power, autonomy, and control, and I just have a really good feeling that I'm going to love it. I think that its themes are going to be interesting. It's also really short, so I think it'll be fast to get through, and I'm already anticipating that I'm going to give it 5 stars. The question that I will end with today is, do you have any new reading goals for the year? Again, like I mentioned before, I will still be trying to read these books, but my other goal just more broadly is to read more genres. Usually by this point in the year, in past years, I've read a really good mixture of different genres, but my 2025 has been very romance heavy so far, so I would like to branch out just a little more. I'm not going to stop reading romance by any means, but I think I would just like to be a little bit more well-rounded in my genres, because I have been in the past, and variety is usually something that I really enjoy and value in my reading life, and there just has not been quite as much genre variety this year so far. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me as I answered these mid-year book freakout tag questions. Again, if you want to answer these questions down in the comments, I would really love to know your answers, particularly what your favorite book of the year so far has been. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified of the next time I post, and I will see you in my next video.